Okay, let's go to the book of Ezekiel in your Bibles. And lesson number 20. The book of Ezekiel and lesson number 20 in your notebook, page 86. If you want to turn to that place. All right. Glad you're here trucking along. Wow, we're on lesson 20 out of 52, so making some progress here, getting closer to finishing up the Old Testament. And let's say those books of the Bible, all right? Make sure you get those pounded in your brain. It's very important for us in our lives. Here we go. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, 2 Kings, 1 Chronicles, 2 Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi. Very good. All right, so we're in the book of Ezekiel there. Find Psalms and hang a right in your Bibles, and you can come over to the book of Ezekiel. Let me give you a little bit of an outline as to how this book plays out here in relation to chronology. When the children of Israel sinned, God sent the Babylonians to take out the southern kingdom of Judah. Of course, the Assyrians took the northern kingdom out, some almost 100 years, a little more than 100 years before this in 722. But when the Babylonians came, they came in three different waves. There were three different times of that, and that'll really help you to understand some of these different events when you realize that the Babylonians came three times. The first one, they took Daniel and others in 605 BC. This was the first attack, and Jehoiakim is the king at that moment. And they're taken to Babylon. There's an actual picture from the event taking place there on the screen. Just seeing if you're awake this morning. All right, just kidding. Somebody's drawing of it, okay? And then 597 is the second attack. Jehoiachin is the king at that moment, and his captivity. Ezekiel, who we're talking about today, goes in the second wave there, the second attack. And then the ultimate one is when we see Jeremiah a little bit more in connection with that. He's left behind, but that's the final attack, and Zedekiah is the king at that time. You see some of that brought out there in the first couple paragraphs of your handout here. And so the 70-year captivity starting in 605 BC. 8 years later, Jerusalem revolts, and Nebuchadnezzar comes that second time there, and he takes 10,000 statesmen, soldiers, craftsmen, Ezekiel, and by taking the most prominent men of the country, you would think that he could better control Judah and in all their desires to be rebellious. They're rebelling against God and rebelling against everybody in life, it seems like. So Nebuchadnezzar makes Zedekiah the king, and Zedekiah is going to rule for 11 years, from 597 to 586 BC in that way. And there was a lot of transition in these years, as we've talked about. Assyria had been the dominant world empire. Babylon conquers them. Egypt's running in, trying to stop Babylon from becoming the new power. And so Zedekiah hopes that Egypt's going to help out there. And so they rebel against Babylon, and finally Nebuchadnezzar's had it. In reality, God has had it. And that third wave comes in after a period of a couple of years of siege. The city falls and is destroyed, and we're studying the results of that the next hour in the book of Lamentations. All right? So it seems like Ezekiel's then in his mid-20s. He's a young contemporary of Jeremiah. And let's look at a few of these opening verses here. Ezekiel chapter 1, verse number 1. Now it came to pass in the 30th year, in the 4th month, in the 5th day of the month, as I was among the captives by the river of Chebar, that the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. In the 5th day of the month, which was the 5th year of King Jehoiachin's captivity, the word of the Lord came expressly unto Ezekiel the priest, the son of Buzi, in the land of the Chaldeans by the river Chebar, and the hand of the Lord was there upon him. So Ezekiel seems to be training to be a priest, and so when he is taken into captivity, all of that is obviously going to stop. Not going to be training anymore for that. All right, but by the 5th year of his captivity, God calls him to be a prophet, as we read about in those opening verses of chapter number 1. And so he has a priestly lineage and ends up serving as a prophet of God. And of course, there is much throughout the book in connection to this priestly aspect. God calls Ezekiel to explain his actions in allowing the Israelites to be taken into captivity. And there's this phrase, really, if you read the book of Ezekiel, you see it over and over and over and over again, so much so that you can really just mark your Bibles with it. You see it a lot even in the closing chapters. They shall know that I am the Lord. Used 70 times in the book. That's going to stand out to you. They shall know that I am the Lord. And the Israelites had sinned. And they're going to suffer horribly for their sins. And we're going to see this again in Lamentations, again in the next hour. But God's not done with the children of Israel. They have sinned and they're going to be punished, but God's not writing them off. No, God is going to be doing things in their lives so that they shall know that He's the Lord. God's going to be doing things for the nation of Israel so that they would know that He is the Lord. He was punishing them for their sins, but He was also at the same time drawing them back to Himself. And so you see this message in the book of Ezekiel, this important truth, they shall know that I am the Lord. And it really was an amazing thing that the children of Israel, after this captivity, didn't have a problem. They didn't struggle anymore with idolatry. Now they struggled with other things because the battle is never over. They struggled in Jesus' day with hypocrisy. But the captivity and that spiritual spanking, if we can call it that, did cure them of idolatry. They didn't follow other gods anymore. So here's a little bit of an outline down at the bottom of the book. Pretty basic breakdown of the book with Ezekiel's call and vision, prophecies about the sins of Judah, foreign nations, and then the certainty of return. All right, so we'll touch on a few of these things here this morning. Page 87, next page there. And let's talk about Ezekiel's call and vision. So his book is a book of visions, and it's similar to those in the book of Revelation. We read verse number 1 that talks about the 30th year, and most people believe that that probably refers to Ezekiel's 30th year, the year that he turns 30. The priests, those that were of the priestly family, would have become priests in their 30th year. They served as priests from 30 to 50, and so it seems to be that it's indicating that that is his own age. All right. What does Ezekiel see in his vision, and what is his reaction? Verse number 5, also out of the midst thereof. Well, let's go back to verse 4 and pick it up there. And I looked, and behold, a whirlwind came out of the north, a great cloud, and a fire enfolding itself, and a brightness was about it, and out of the midst thereof, as the color of amber, out of the midst of the fire. Also out of the midst thereof came the likeness of 4 living creatures. And this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man. We'll turn over to verse number 28. As the appearance of the bow that is in the cloud in the day of rain, so was the appearance of the brightness round about. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. And when I saw it, I fell upon my face, and I heard a voice of one that spake. And so Ezekiel has this vision of these 4 living creatures, and of this rainbow, and that is certainly something that we see in the book of Revelation as well. And so he has this incredible vision there in chapter number 1. Chapter number 2, he's addressed as the Son of Man. Of course, a term that we think of with Jesus Christ quite often. But Ezekiel is a human being. He's a mortal man. And Ezekiel's call is made clear in chapter 2, verses 4 through 9. Notice this call. For they are impudent children and stiff-hearted. I do send thee unto them, and thou shalt say unto them, Thus saith the Lord God. All right, so what's the purpose of God's call on Ezekiel's life? All right, he's going to preach to these people. He's going to preach to these stiff-necked people that won't listen, won't respond. How is that similar to Isaiah and Jeremiah? Was that a similar call? Was it different? Do you remember when we studied Isaiah and Jeremiah last couple weeks? Isaiah chapter 6, right? He sees also the Lord high and lifted up, and God says he needs someone, and Isaiah says, "Here am I, Lord, send me." And he says basically the same thing, maybe not in the exact same words, but you're going to go and you're going to preach to people that aren't going to listen. And we talked about it last week, that Jeremiah had the same experience as well. They're going to preach to some backslidden, sinful people that really are struggling to listen to the Lord. It's just always a good reminder, how well do we listen to the correction that God sends into our lives? It's so much easier if we'll just listen to correction. If we don't listen to correction, then we get the chastening of the Lord. You can either have correction or you can have chastening. But if you don't listen when God just tries to speak to you, then more severe things come. And if it's ever a sobering thing, it ought to be as you read through Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, how much easier it would have been if they just would have listened to him. Their lives would have been so much better. But so many times we as Christians don't listen when we are corrected. And it makes a sad difference in our lives that we don't listen to the correction. Ezekiel has this responsibility of being a witness. And let's go to chapter 3. We're just kind of hopping through a couple of these chapters here. Chapter 3 and verse number 18. When I say unto the wicked, thou shalt surely die, and thou givest him not warning, nor speakest to warn the wicked from his wicked way to save his life, the same wicked man shall die in his iniquity. But his blood will I require at thine hand. And so we have a responsibility as well. Wicked people are going to perish because they make their own choices. They choose to sin. They choose to do what is wrong. But it's our responsibility to warn them. And if we don't warn them, their blood is required at our hands. So we want to make sure that we're faithful in that. It's a good reminder of evangelism. It's a good reminder to be involved in sharing the gospel with others. And do your part about it. So that's kind of the introductory chapters here, Ezekiel's call and vision, the first 3 chapters. Now the next major chunk in the book of Ezekiel is prophecies of the sins of Judah. All right, that's going to be the major section, and then he's going to get some prophecies in regard to foreign nations as well. But in chapters 4 and 5, Ezekiel enacts the siege and the destruction of Jerusalem. He has some props for his drama, a large brick. And on the brick, he draws an outline of the city. And there's a metal pan. He bakes the flat loaves, and the people watch this drama unfold as Ezekiel weighs out his meager measure of mixed grain and water ration, and they get the message. We've studied this in Lamentations, what ultimately happens a few years later as they go under the siege, when Babylon surrounds them for 2 to 3 years, and people are starving and begin to practice cannibalistic practices just to try to survive. Then Ezekiel shaves his head to show Jerusalem's disgrace. And all this represented how Judah would waste away in captivity until only a tiny handful, meaning the exiles, would remain. All right, so pretty interesting thing how he does this drama to communicate this message in chapters 4 and 5. One of Ezekiel's very important visions is in this section. In this vision of glory and godlessness, Ezekiel is transported to Jerusalem and set down beside the temple. And what does the Lord show Ezekiel concerning the practices of the temple? Chapter 8, verse number 7. And he brought me to the door of the court, and when I looked, behold, a hole in the wall. Then said he unto me, Son of man, dig now in the wall. And when I had digged in the wall, behold, a door. And he said unto me, Go in, and behold the wicked abominations that they do here. So I went in and saw, and behold, every form of creeping things and abominable beasts, and all the idols of the house of Israel portrayed upon the wall round about. And there stood before them 70 men of the ancients of the house of Israel. And in the midst of them stood Jezaniah, the son of Shaphan, with every man his censer in his hand, and a thick cloud of incense went up. Then said he unto me, Son of man, hast thou seen what the ancients of the house of Israel do in the dark, every man in the chambers of his imagery? For they say, The Lord sees us not. The Lord hath forsaken the earth. He said also unto me, Turn thee yet again, and thou shalt see greater abominations that they do. And so what does the Lord show Ezekiel? He shows them the temple filled with idols. The ancients of Israel, the elders of Israel are worshiping these. And they're saying that God has forsaken them. God doesn't see. There. Isn't that interesting? At the end of verse number 12, the Lord sees us not. You're all good church-going people. You know about God. You know that God sees everything. I would think these people would mentally know those facts as well. Let's pause here for just a moment. How do we live as if God does not see us, see our sin, see our iniquity? How do we live like that at times? How is that communicated sometimes by our actions or thought processes? All right, take a minute or two at your table and discuss that. Okay, so let's be careful that we don't live as if God isn't watching. We know it mentally, but we don't always live as if God is watching everything we do in the privacy of our own car, office, house, job, whatever. God does see, all right? Let's back up and get that other question that I didn't give you the answer to. Chapter number 9, what does God say He's going to do because of Judah's iniquity? And he describes in verses 4 through 10 all the things that are going to happen to them. Look at verse 6. Slay utterly old and young, both maids and little children and women. Verse number 7, he said unto them, defile the house and fill the courts with the slain. Just talking about all that will die in this battle. And look at verse 10. And as for me also, mine eye shall not spare, neither will I have pity, but I will recompense their way upon their head. All right? So many are going to be killed. The temple is going to be defiled. And God is not sparing or having pity upon them. They have sinned, and sin always brings death. The wages of sin is death. So very, very sobering. God warned, and yet they didn't listen to it. Chapter number 10, God's glory departs from the temple itself. Sobering thought, isn't it? God's own temple. Go to chapter 18. Regardless of what people think, God is always fair when punishing a generation of His people. What does He say about His judgments in chapter 18? Verses 19 and 20. Yet say ye, why? Doth not the Son bear the iniquity of the Father? When the Son hath done that which is lawful and right, and hath kept all my statutes, and hath done them, he shall surely live. The soul that sinneth, it shall die. The Son shall not bear the iniquity of the Father, neither shall the Father bear the iniquity of the Son. The righteousness of the righteous shall be upon him, and the wickedness of the wicked shall be upon him. And so he's, let me get on the other side. People are going to be judged for their own sins, not for those of their parents, not for those of their children. They're going to bear their own sins. God is fair in giving out punishments. Sometimes we struggle with that. We talked about that a little bit last week in Lamentations 2. You know, they had sinned horrible consequences were on them, and then we get mad at God. And that's usually the way it is in all of life. We do wrong, and yet we get mad and upset at whoever brings punishment upon us. So, pretty sobering thing here. So that finishes up this section as far as what we can look at it on the prophecies about the sins of Judah and their coming punishment, which happens in 586 BC. The next section, Roman number 3, are the prophecies about foreign nations. And whom does the Lord command Ezekiel to prophesy against in 25, 2, 8, 12, and 15? Let me give you those, all right? For sake of time, we're going to click right through these. I only got a few minutes left. Ammonites, Moab, Edom, and Philistia, all right, are those nations that are mentioned in those verses. And if you want to flip back, just briefly glance at page number 46. You see a map there on page 46. And what do all of these countries have in common? What geographic fact do they have in common? They all border the Promised Land. They all border around Israel. They're all aware of Israel's God. They're all going to be a little bit more accountable. And listen, God doesn't just hold His own people accountable. God holds all the nations accountable. God is going to judge all. Someday there will be an accounting of every person that's ever lived. They will stand before God at one of two judgments. Either the Bema seat or they will stand at the great white throne. And so it's important for us to understand that God does hold them accountable as well. The last section that we have then is the certainty of their return. Again, God's not done with the children of Israel. God has a plan for them. And so chapters 33 to 48 bring out some of that truth here. All right, chapter 33 and verse number 11, God has no pleasure in the death of the wicked, but He wants them to turn and to live. All right. A couple more things here. I want to show you a little bit of a layout of this in a moment. One of the most famous chapters in all of Ezekiel is chapter 37, them bones, them dry bones. Is that chapter 37 there? And what does God tell Ezekiel to do? Preach to the bones. Preach to the bones. And then the bones become this living people. They stand on their feet like a great army, and it means that Israel is going to live again. God's not done with Israel. He's not done with His chosen people. He has a plan for them. And book after book after book of the Bible bring out that truth. And this was an important message. The Jewish people sin. They are going to suffer in horrible, wretched agony for their sin. And yet our God is such a good God that even in their sin and their suffering, He comforts them. He encourages them. There's a day coming in which Israel will be revived and they will return to the land and be reunited as one nation, and all of these aspects of it that are brought out here that are very, very important. All right. So here's a little bit of the layout, the coming judgment, the judgment on the nations, and then if you want to call it the certainty of the return or future restoration, that someday the Jewish people will be restored, is an amazing thing. Ezekiel chapter 38 is probably one of the most controversial chapters in the book. It deals with that famous battle of Gog and Magog. Those two location, or those two individuals, Gog, Magog, whatever those two are also mentioned in Revelation chapter 20. So there's a lot of discussion about those things. And I'm going to show you a quick image about that to help in just a moment. Here's a little bit of the outline that I would give you for these chapters. If they're going to be restored, they're going to need a new leader. Their enemies are going to have to be removed. They're going to have to return to the land. The nation be resurrected. Gog be repulsed. Have a new temple, a new worship, and a new land. And so that's a little bit of an outline of those closing chapters to give you a little bit of concept there. So sometimes people, as they study Gog and Magog, are unsure as to when that battle happens. There are some different opinions. I believe that that battle happens near the front end of the tribulation. When Israel is at peace in the time of the Antichrist, and he has promised them great peace, and yet right away war happens as this horde descends from the north and attacks them. And so I believe that the Revelation 20 reference to Gog and Magog is not the same battle, but is rather a reference to, again, more that would attack God and would attack God's people. They are similar to the original Gog and Magog there. All right. We know nothing of the closing years of Ezekiel's life. All right. So that was a whirlwind trip through Ezekiel. And next week, Lord willing, we'll look at Daniel. Listen to correction so you don't have to experience chastening. All right. Have a good day.